It waited beneath the water, silent, invisible, and merciless. When the tide began to fall, sharpened wooden spikes emerged like the teeth of some ancient sea monster, tearing through hulls, splitting warships, and sealing the fate of an empire. And yet most people today don't even know this hidden weapon existed. Time and again, the Mongols sent their mighty armies south. Tens of thousands of cavalry, fleets of warships, all backed by the greatest empire on earth. And yet they were defeated not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. On these humid battlefields and treacherous rivers, the invincible Mongols met their match. This was the secret strategy of the Vietnamese at the Battle of Bac Dang in 1288. A plan so precise, so devastating, that it erased the Mongol Great Navy from history. Welcome to your daily history channel, Heroic History, where we bring you incredible stories of ancient warfare. Every single day, we're proud to be part of a growing community of history lovers. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so we can keep sharing epic battle stories every single day. So, how did a smaller navy lure the mighty Mongols into their own destruction? What kind of engineering made the river itself into a weapon? And how did this small kingdom's defiance reshape the balance of power in Asia? Let's find out. Imagine a picture of the perfect battlefield, a single winding stretch of water that would decide the fate of an empire. I'm talking about the Bac Dang River, the site of one of the most brilliant tactical victories in all of medieval warfare. To really understand why this river mattered, you have to imagine where it sits. The Bac Dang lies in the northeast of modern Vietnam, connecting the Gulf of Tonkin to the heart of the Red River Delta, the economic and political center of Viet during the Tran dynasty. In the 13th century, it was the only navigable route deep enough for large fleets to reach the capital. To anyone planning an invasion, especially the Mongols, this river looked like a golden highway straight into the country's core. And that's exactly what doomed them. The Mongols weren't used to fighting on water. They ruled the steppes, not the seas. But during their 1287 to 1288 invasion of Diviet, they had no choice. Their entire campaign depended on their great fleet. Hundreds of transport ships carrying tens of thousands of soldiers, horses, siege engines, and supplies. These ships were huge, deep draft vessels built for open waters, not for the narrow, unpredictable rivers of northern Vietnam. Still, they came prepared. Historical accounts describe nearly 300,000 men sailing south, packed onto ships loaded with weapons, armor, and provisions. Their plan was detailed, even scientific. After studying the terrain from previous failed invasions, the Mongols chose Van Keep as their base, a strategically perfect spot. There they built sprawling military camps, heavily fortified and protected by both land and naval forces. It became a kind of Mongol fortress city, part harbor, part stronghold, where infantry and navy worked together like gears in a war machine. Sure, they'd taken a few hard hits in earlier battles, but their confidence hadn't wavered. Their numbers were still enormous, their ships impressive, and their strategy tight. But despite all that power, Commander Omar faced a simple, unavoidable truth. To reach Hanoi, he had to go through the Bac Dong River. That made it the perfect trap. Tran Hung Dao, the commander of Daviet, saw what the Mongols couldn't. Geography itself could be a weapon. Since the Mongols had no other route to Hanoi, he didn't have to guess where they'd strike. He knew exactly where they'd come from and could focus all his effort, all his engineering, and all his forces on a single river. And that river, the Bac Dang, was nothing short of a natural marvel. 5 streams merged here, rushing toward the sea through 3 smaller tributaries. It's not a long stretch, barely 5 kilometers, but in that short distance, the river becomes the perfect trap. At high tide, the water swells over 200 miles wide, giving the impression of calm, easy sailing. Any fleet might think it's smooth waters ahead. But when the tide falls, the river narrows dramatically, exposing hidden depths, some plunging as far as 16 min. What looked like safe passage becomes a nightmare for ships with deep holes. Drunhunger turned this natural rhythm into a weapon. He ordered thousands of wooden stakes, thick, sharpened, and sometimes tipped with iron, to be driven deep into the riverbed. When archaeologists began excavating the Khao Kwai site, one of several believed to be part of the battlefield, they found hundreds of wooden stakes still buried deep in the mud, preserved by the river itself. Some were almost 5 emitter long. That's over 16 eft, about the height of a man, with diameters up to half a meter. Each one had been handcrafted from rare hardwoods, species known for their incredible density and water resistance. For one, the bottoms of the stakes were cut flat, not pointed like you might expect. That sounds strange, right? You'd think a pointed end would go into the mud more easily, but a flat base gave the stake a much wider surface area, like a snowshoe, allowing it to stay firmly anchored in soft, shifting river sediment. That stability was crucial when facing the heavy impact of a Mongol warship. The Vietnamese engineers of the 13th century clearly knew what they were doing. Cutting, shaping, and transporting these hardwood logs required enormous manpower and planning. We're talking about a logistical operation involving hundreds, maybe thousands of workers, from lumberjacks in the forests to river engineers in the delta. Imagine massive wooden frames, ropes, pulleys, and weighted hammers, all working together to pound each pole vertically into place. That's not simple manual labor. That's 13th century engineering on an industrial scale, and all of it had to be done in secret. And then there were the horizontal grooves or notches carved into many of the stakes. Archaeologists have debated their purpose, but the most likely explanations are both practical and tactical. The grooves could have been used to tie ropes or attach lifting devices to help transport or position the stakes. Others believe they served as anchor points to lash stakes together underwater, effectively linking them into a rigid defensive grid that could trap and tear apart any ship trying to force its way through. The layout of the stakes was just as deliberate as their design. Excavations show they were placed about 4 to 5 meters apart, forming dense lines that stretched across the river. Most were driven straight down, designed to snag and immobilize deep-hulled ships. But one discovery stood out. A limb stake tilted at a 45 degrees angle pointing southwest, directly against the river's current. That detail may sound minor, but it changes everything. A slanted stake like that wouldn't just stop a ship, it would puncture it. When the tide dropped and a Mongol vessel tried to back out of the trap, the retreating current would push it straight onto that slanted spear, tearing open the hole from below. The angled stakes acted like fixed harpoons, invisible, inescapable, and deadly. Even more astonishing, some stakes were found lying horizontally at depths of over 2.5 meters, suggesting a multi-layered trap. The upper rows stopped ships. The lower ones ensured they were destroyed if they sank or tried to break free. It was a 3-dimensional defense grid, the medieval equivalent of a naval minefield, and we know these aren't legends. Scientists have confirmed it. Carbon-14 dating of the wooden samples from Khao Kwai places them between 1270 and 1430, perfectly matching the Tran Dynasty era Seor, and most importantly, the Battle of Bakdang in 1288. Put all of this together and you see the genius of Tran Hung Dao's plan. Every detail was intentional: the choice of materials, the structure of each stake, the spacing, the angles, and even the rhythm of the tides. The river became a machine, a living weapon, triggered by the pull of the moon. When the Mongol ships sailed into the Bakdang River at high tide, everything looked calm, wide, open, and deceptively safe. But the moment the tide began to fall, the river transformed into a forest of deadly spears. Hundreds, maybe even thousands of sharpened wooden stakes, some tipped with iron, suddenly jutted from the riverbed like jagged teeth, ready to pierce the hulls of any unsuspecting vessel. And here's the genius part. This wasn't luck. Tran Hung Dao and his commanders had timed everything with precision. The tides, the Mongol approach, even the speed of the ships. You could almost call it a scientific operation. Historians now call it the tidal trigger. As the water dropped, the stakes did their work, blocking escape routes, crippling the fleet, and turning ships that had seemed safe moments ago into immobilized, skewered targets. The geography helped too. Tall mountains and thick forests along the riverbanks provided perfect cover. Vietnamese troops and smaller boats could gather in secret, invisible to the Mongols, ready to strike swiftly and vanish just as fast. Mobility and concealment went hand in hand, turning the river into a deadly stage for ambush after ambush. But Tran Hung Dao's brilliance went beyond geography or engineering. He had learned from history. Over 300 years earlier in 938, Viet forces had already used a similar tactic on this same river, annihilating the invading Southern Hand fleet. He wasn't reinventing the wheel, he was refining it to deadly perfection. When the Mongols retreated from Van Keep toward the river, it wasn't a disorganized flight. Toggen's forces were still strong, protected by cavalry escorts. Tran Hung Dao positioned a combined force of regular troops and local militias along the escape route. Every group had a precise mission: disrupt the Mongol cavalry, isolate the ships from their escort, and funnel the fleet straight into the trap. And so, with a mix of precision and patience, Viet's forces shadowed the retreating Mongols, never fully engaging, only nudging and steering them toward the trap. Timing was everything. Hung Ja's troops had to ensure the Yuan fleet reached the ambush point precisely as the tide began to recede, because only then would the river's hidden stakes rise from the water, turning what looked like calm, open waters into a lethal graveyard. It was the 9th of April, 1288. The mighty Yuan Mongol fleet, exhausted after their relentless campaign through Diet, was making its way down the Bac Dong River. The tide was high, the river wide and deceptively calm, perfect conditions for Hung Xiu's plan. The Dvat fleet moved out in full force, rowing toward the Yuan, and just as he predicted, the Mongols took the bait. Seeing what appeared to be a retreating enemy, they surged forward, confident that victory was at hand. But this was no ordinary chase. Psychology was at play. The Mongols were frustrated, fatigued, and under immense pressure to retreat north before their supply lines collapsed. So when they spotted an enemy seemingly fleeing, pride and impatience clouded their judgment. They plunged deeper into the narrow river, unaware that the tide was subtly shifting beneath them. Within hours, the water level dropped by roughly 75 to 110 centimeters, just enough to change everything. The Yuan ships, heavy and deeply laden, suddenly scraped against the riverbed, catching on something solid. One by one, they slowed. Imagine the sound, the deep, terrifying crack of wood against iron spikes. Shouts of confusion echoing across the river, and the panicked cries of sailors realizing they were trapped. And then it happened. Just as Hung Xiao had calculated, the receding tide revealed hundreds, maybe thousands of sharpened wooden stakes hidden beneath the water, some tipped with iron. The Yuan fleet, already deep in the narrow river, had nowhere to maneuver. Ships crashed into the stakes, pierced through hulls, and began sinking one by one. The river, peaceful moments before, erupted into chaos. That's when the Viet fleet struck. From the flanks, small, agile vessels surged forward, surrounding the Mongols on all sides. Other ships rammed head-on into the immobilized fleet, while archers and crossbowmen fired from concealed positions along the banks. Every element of the trap, the tide, the stakes, the geography, the timing of the attacks worked in perfect harmony. The Mongols, who had conquered empires from China to the Middle East, were now trapped, helpless, and utterly destroyed. And if that wasn't enough, at just the perfect moment, boats loaded with fire-starting materials were sent into the river. Flames leapt across the water, racing from ship to ship. Wooden hulls crackled, sails caught fire, and entire stretches of the Bakdang River erupted in a blazing inferno. Ships that had looked untouchable just moments before were now writhing targets of fire and smoke, their decks filled with panicked soldiers struggling to escape. The UN Mongols weren't done yet. Desperate, they tried to regroup, pushing their remaining forces up toward the Tran Mountains, hoping the high ground would offer some safety. But the Diet had anticipated this. Hidden units waiting in the mountains waited for the perfect moment. As the Mongols made their stand, Deviate forces struck, pushing them back down toward the river. The natural geography worked like another silent weapon. Nestled within the river was the rocky coast, 5 jagged stone outcrops that blocked nearly 3/4 of the river's width. This forced the UN ships into narrow, treacherous channels, leaving them exposed and unable to maneuver. The river's twists, turns, and rocky outcrops turned their retreat into a trap. The escape route to Nam Triur, their only hope of fleeing, was completely blocked. One by one, the Mongol ships were impaled on stakes hidden beneath the water, caught sideways or head-on, like fish on a line. The chaos was complete. Ships collided with one another, blocking the river and leaving the Mongols trapped. The once mighty navy, the same force that had swept through China and Korea, was now a tangled mess of splintered hulls, burning wood, and desperate men struggling in the mud and water. At the climax of the battle, Great Lord Tron Hung Dao, alongside King Tron Huntong and the former King Tron Thuntong, led the final charge. The king's presence inspired every soldier and sailor. Oars pulled with strength, arrows flew in perfect coordination, and swords cut with lethal precision. Elite guards, normally tasked with protecting the royal family, now fought freely, pouring their fury onto the trapped invaders. From both riverbanks, waves of fire arrows and flaming rafts rained down. The Mongol ships, immobilized and crowded together, were perfect targets. Oil, tar, and supplies fueled the inferno. Smoke filled the air, heat warped the hulls, and soldiers struggled to escape as the fire consumed everything in its path. Some ships split apart under the weight of water and tide, others burned in place, leaving men and horses flailing helplessly in the river. Meanwhile, the UN Mongol forces were falling apart. The sight of the Royal Deviate fleet charging in sent waves of panic through their ranks. It was as if the river itself had turned against them. They tried to fight back, but the tide had already shifted. The Diviate closed in like a relentless wave crashing over rocks, unstoppable and overwhelming. Battle cries rang out, steel clashed, and the screams of the dying echoed across the river. Blood ran thick in the water, turning at a deep crimson, as the UN found themselves surrounded on all sides, trapped between fire, stakes, and the fierce Vietnamese warriors. By the end of the day, the Mongol naval threat was completely annihilated. The once mighty UN fleet, around 600 ships strong, had been utterly destroyed. Nearly 400 vessels were seized by the Deviate, while the remaining 200 sank beneath the river, their hulls smashed and disappearing into the murky depths. And the men, roughly 60,000 soldiers, seasoned warriors of the UN Navy, were either cut down in battle or captured. Not a single ship or soldier escaped. The great Mongol naval force, which had conquered so many lands before, was wiped from the Bakdong River, gone, erased, never to threaten Deviate again. And yet, just when it seemed the UN Mongols were on the verge of total annihilation, a surprising order came down from the highest authority. King Tran Nan Tong commanded his generals to cease the pursuit. Stop chasing. Let Togun's forces retreat. At first glance, it seemed counterintuitive. Why allow the enemy to escape after inflicting such a crushing defeat? But the decision was rooted in strategy and wisdom. Great Lord Tran Hunga and the king understood the bigger picture. They wanted to demonstrate the strength and unity of Deviate, to leave no doubt in the minds of the UN dynasty about their power. But even then, Tron Nan Tong and Great Lord Hung Jiao knew the limits of war. The Yuan dynasty wasn't just any enemy. It was vast, powerful and capable of striking deep into Diviet if provoked further. An all-out annihilation could spark a drawn-out conflict, devastating the people they had fought so hard to protect. The king understood something fundamental. True victory wasn't just destroying the enemy, it was preserving your own people and ensuring lasting peace. In that moment, strategy, mercy, and foresight intertwined, showing that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in pursuing total destruction, but in knowing when to stop. And yet that decision wasn't easy for everyone. The Deviate soldiers, burning with rage from years of Mongol invasions, struggled to obey. Their hearts screamed for vengeance. How could they let Togun go free after all the pain and suffering? Driven by that anger, commanders pressed the retreating UN forces anyway, using every advantage the terrain offered. High mountains and dense forests became hunting grounds. Ambushes rained down from the trees. Poisoned arrows struck from hidden positions, and every narrow path became a trap. The UAN soldiers, already exhausted, fell in droves. Their bodies littered the roads, a grim testament to the relentless pursuit. Finally, after what must have felt like an eternity, Tohan and the remnants of his once mighty army stumbled back across the northern mountains, bloodied and broken. The date was February 19th, 1288. A campaign that had begun with thousands of seasoned warriors ended with a mere handful limping home. Morale shattered, their spirit utterly crushed. The third Mongol invasion of Daviet, which had seemed unstoppable at the outset, had ended in a brutal, humiliating defeat. But the victory wasn't just military, it shattered the Mongols' logistical backbone. Their transport ships, supply lines, and means of retreat were all destroyed. Thousands of men died or were captured, including the famous General Omar. Those who survived fled north through jungles and mountains, broken and demoralized. The invasion was over, but its impact resonated far beyond the battlefield. The brilliance of Bak Dong lay not merely in building a trap, it was in the timing. Tran Hunga had studied the river and its tides like a master engineer. He turned nature itself into a weapon. The river, calm and seemingly safe at high tide, became an executioner as the waters receded, exposing thousands of hidden stakes. Those stakes weren't just physical obstacles, they were instruments of psychological warfare, exploiting the enemy's confidence and impatience. In the end, the Mongols didn't just lose a battle, they lost the notion that their empire was invincible. For Dviet, the victory was more than survival. It was a statement written in tides, wood, and blood. It proved that even a smaller, less equipped force could defeat a far stronger enemy, when intelligence, timing, and strategy became the ultimate equalizers. Tran Hung Dao didn't try to overpower the Mongols head-on. Instead, he turned their greatest strengths, their massive, deep draft ships and reliance on waterways, into fatal weaknesses. It's the classic paradox of warfare. What gives an army its power can also lead to its downfall when met with creativity, planning, and intimate knowledge of the battlefield. And that's why even today, Bakdang isn't remembered merely as a military victory. It's remembered as proof that mastery over nature, precise timing, and human coordination can change the course of history. A battle fought on a river, but won in the mind. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this one, hit that like button and subscribe. We'll be back tomorrow with another great story from the past.